Hello everyone, this is Uthris and welcome back to Scrap Mechanic. We are building the Delorean from Back to the Future, and it's going to be quite a cool build, I think. We're just going to be looking at some sped up footage of the overall kind of proportions and how they were laid out. Of course, like always, we're going to be starting out with just a basic suspension and kind of chassis for the wheels so we can get the length proportion all set. And then once you have that, you can generally make decisions on with the details and then also just the overall body shape. And the way I do this generally is we're going to be using a lot of just normal blocks for a couple reasons. We're going to want to weigh down the suspension because once the thing is built, we're going to be wanting to see exactly how it's going to be laying. So obviously adding more weight than necessary early on helps with the overall proportions, as once this thing is fully constructed, as we said, may not sit right on the ground. So we have our general length at the moment, and we put in kind of our seats roughly in the center. It is just a two-seater, and then looking at it, you know, it was probably going to be a little bit too long in this stage. But I decided to just keep going, putting in some electric engines, unlike normal, and then realizing that we should probably cut it off and make it just a little bit shorter by about, I think it was about 7 or so blocks. So we did trim off a good bit of extra fat on the end there. Now, a lot of this, because the DeLorean is quite an angled vehicle, I had to use some pretty interesting techniques here later on. That I ended up doing off camera. All this stuff is just a lot of basic body work, trying to get the overall shape correct. And then what we do generally from there is replace all of these little 1x1 blocks with larger blocks or other decorative things to kind of flesh it out and make it look a little bit more interesting and less plain. We're going to add these grills in the back. Obviously, just because there will be the actual mechanism for this thing to travel back in time on the back end, and trying to get proportions set here is gonna hopefully help us later on. Now there is a lot of driving and testing of just how the thing behaves, because if I'm able to catch little nuances early on, I can change the body shape a lot quicker and easier. For example, the wheel well for tires, you can get all this testing done early so that you can make sure your turning has enough clearance to work before you get this fully detailed and beautiful vehicle, and then it just turns out that it's just not going to work. Now, at this point, we're adding a little bit of these 45-degree angles here because the way the DeLorean is shaped, it has probably about a 30-degree slope on the front half and in the back half. And Scrap Mechanic, you can really only build with blocks on a 45-degree slope. And so that's going to throw quite a wrench in our plans. But for now, I'm just ignoring it because I don't want to worry about kind of the fine details like that. Again, we're just working on the overall basic shape, trying to find the floor at this point, and kind of the basic fenders on these things. And everything is not painted or anything. That's definitely a finishing detail that we'll be seeing here towards the end of the episode. But assigning the roof line here, trying to make sure, I didn't want the camera clipping like the Batmobile from last time when we sit down in these seats, but because of just the limitations of how tall this thing is, you'll see how boxy this looks, and it just looks wrong. Like, it doesn't look sleek at all. It looks very similar to like a really bad golf cart, in my opinion. It was not going well. And here, just testing to see maybe some details on the back there. Here's the front kind of fender. We're trying to figure out how to do the front grille and things like that at this point, because it has kind of a stub nose look on the front. And I like kind of how thin the engine bay is, and And so this is kind of the advanced technique that we're going to be using here. Is I had to put this piece of metal down, and then I set it to a control block and just let it passively sit at a 15-degree slope. And what that's going to do is give us the angle we need for the hood line without having to use those 45-degree angle slopes. Now the problem with doing things like that is trying to make that slope match the rest of the body. And you can see we're going to widen it, and then the fenders will hopefully cover up and hug the side enough to make it look a little bit more sleek. We will have that kind of line. Every time we do this, we're going to have this line break from the actual rotation of the block, which does look a little weird, but there's not much you can do otherwise in Scrap Mechanic to kind of solve that issue. Here, we're just going to go ahead and do the same trick, I believe, for the front windshield. It was an angled slope as well, and trying to get this basic shape on the front end was super important to me. So that's why we're spending a lot of time trying and troubleshooting these type of things early on. Oh, there's the Batmobile in the background, of course. Here we're trying to work on the fenders, make it merge into the body well enough, and keep those lines relatively smooth and close in. I don't want, a whole lot of things sticking out on the sides. It's a relatively thin profiled shape, not a whole lot of sweeping lines on it. It's rather boxy if you break it down. And at this point, we need to start working on some of the doors. And they have the wing doors, and so it's quite a troublesome fit to do here. The way Scrap Mechanic works and everything, I can't hinge things quite right. And again, just having fun driving it, I guess. Things will just catch on like the corner of like the body, or I can't get things perfectly flush. And so these doors were quite a struggle to kind of flesh out and get to working, because I had to make them wrap around the actual windshield, because that was a piece that the doors couldn't open with that thing kind of in the way. And in the final version, we end up kind of tucking the windshield in a little bit more, just to give us extra room so the door can fit and we have a nice front profile on the car, because you'll probably notice the door just becomes a little bit too bulky for the shape of the vehicle. And we're trying this new format where I'm doing kind of voiceover rather than the normal live build. One, it's a little bit easier for me because I'm not doing the building and the construction at the same time, so it allows me to have a little bit more of a smooth train of thought. You can see here the door, how it sticks out that extra block from the body, and really this is still just kind of testing phases, but it generally works in premise. But I had to cut it off because I ended up building it wrong initially, just because I didn't put it on the rotor block. Yeah, you can see it lift up and down, testing it, making sure it can still work after we're driving it for a bit. That is another issue with using rotors. What I've noticed from the Batmobile, and then also this, it has the same kind of problem. After you drive it, sometimes the door, because it's such a flush kind of two objects interacting with each other, it can get jammed sometimes. And really the only fix at that point is to hop out, throw it on the lift again, which will straighten out all the rotors, and then put it back down, and then it will work pretty much as normal. But you can see how blocky it looks. It doesn't look streamlined or smooth or anything like that in this current state. A lot of testing, trying to get this flush and figure out the basic body line that we need to follow. And you'll notice that there's a lot of gaps because we're using the 30-degree slope for the windshield, plus this door trying to interact with each other. It just doesn't make for... It looks a little go-karty. It almost looks like a roll cage rather than a smooth body panel that's being lifted up. And so that's the problem we're going to be running into. Alright everyone, so this is the finished DeLorean. It is nicely colored with its two-tone color scheme, the nice kind of light gray on top, the black on the lower chassis and back end here. A lot of little details trying to add in to try and make some of the wiring that is on the car, and then also some of the lights. You know, we have quite a light grill. I kind of wish I had a better block to put here to make a grill, but the front end, from the front, it looks nice. You know, it looks like a proper kind of DeLorean in my opinion. There are some areas, just because of how we're having to use slopes, that things don't fit quite correct, but overall it's quite a nice build in my opinion. So back here we have all of the essentials to get us back into time. The blender and power unit, and also the heat sinks to basically handle all the, I forget, either it's plutonium or uranium. I forget which one powers this thing, but one of those. Found a red license plate, back tail lights, and then I'm using some switches here to just give off some additional lighting effects. We have our back exhausts, our wheels, nice in line with the body, and basic fender shapes as well. There were some cordage around the actual door here, and I can't really block how the door functions in this because nothing behaves quite realistically, so I had to run them underneath the vehicle, which looks fine. It's a fine thing. These buttons here, these will open up the doors, and you can hop in and close said door once you're inside. Each seat has its own control over its door, and I am now stuck, and stuck again, and still stuck, and there we go. Okay, I'll open the door next time to get out. It's generally gonna make it easier. So we'll go ahead and hop in this thing, make it drive, so you guys can see how it handles. It handles fairly well. The wheel well does not... Okay, I'm gonna lag for a second as I get close to the Batmobile. That's the one thing the game doesn't do well, is when two vehicles kind of interact with each other, the physics kind of starts to break. But overall, it drives well. We're using electric engines instead of gas engines. I know it ran on like power and everything, so that's why we're not using a gas engine. Pretty sure they used vegetable oil at one point for some fuel for it. I could be wrong. I haven't seen the movie in so long, guys. I'm not really a big movie buff anyways. But this one is a classic vehicle that I did want to create for you all. The only problem with it is probably the wheel well is too small, and so the turning is rather wide on it. But other than that, it behaves rather nicely. We'll go ahead and give you a look on the interior. Plenty of little switches and knobs to kind of boost how sci-fi it looks. We have the radio, of course, to set what year we're going to. We can turn that on. We have a couple buttons. Of course, the first button would open the door, but we're getting kind of the glitch that the door does not want to open, as I accidentally run into the Batmobile and cause more lag again. And then the front, which will open up, and we can see our two electric engines at that point. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this build. It is a rather nice thing to do, kind of, you know, creating kind of famous vehicles and things like that. If you guys have any suggestions on what you want me to build next, go ahead and let me know down below. Go ahead and let me know what you guys think of this one. If there's anything you would like to add or change, I can go ahead and do that as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and go ahead and subscribe, leave a like. That's how I know you guys enjoy this kind of stuff, and I'll see you all next time.